The wind tore through Pineville like a banshee's wail, sharp and mournful, rattling the skeletal branches of the forest that loomed beyond Hannah Marshall's backyard. It was late October, October 23rd, 2025 to be exact, and the air carried the bite of winter's promise, a chill that seeped into her bones as she stood there, pinning damp laundry to a sagging clothesline. Her hands trembled, not just from the cold, but from a weariness that had settled deep within her, a weight she couldn't shake. At 32, Hannah felt ancient, her youth stolen by grief and the relentless grind of keeping her fractured little family afloat. The sky above was a bruised gray, swollen with the threat of rain, and the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to break. Beside her, in the patchy grass of their modest rental yard, knelt her son, Noah. 5 years old, small for his age, he was a quiet shadow of the boy he'd once been. His gray eyes, David's eyes, she thought with a pang, were fixed on a crumbling tower of crimson leaves he'd been building with meticulous care. The leaves fluttered in the wind, their edges curling like brittle paper, and he pressed them down gently, as if they might hold his world together if he could just get it right. He hadn't spoken in 8 months, not a single word, not a whisper, since the night that stole everything from them. Selective mutism, the doctors had labeled it, a clinical term that felt sterile and inadequate. To Hannah, it was heartbreak, pure and simple, a wound she couldn't heal no matter how hard she tried. She glanced at him, her chest tightening with that familiar ache, love and guilt braided together so tightly she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. "Noah, sweetie, stay close," she called, her voice brittle against the wind's howl. It cracked mid-sentence, betraying the exhaustion she fought to hide. He didn't look up, didn't answer. He never did. But he gave a small, solemn nod, his dark hair falling over his forehead. That nod was their language now, a silent pact between them. She turned back to the laundry, pinning a threadbare towel with fingers that shook more than she'd admit. The clothes smelled of cheap detergent, a faint floral scent that did little to mask the dampness of their life here in Pineville, a small town nestled between thick forests and rolling hills, a place where doors stayed unlocked and secrets stayed buried. 8 months ago, everything had changed. David, her husband, Noah's father, had been driving them home from a rare evening out, a diner supper, a treat they couldn't really afford. Noah had been in the back seat, clutching his favorite toy dinosaur, chattering about the stars they'd seen through the car window. Then came the screech of tires, the blinding flash of headlights, the sickening crunch of metal. A drunk driver, they'd said later, a man who'd walked away while David hadn't. Hannah had been thrown clear, bruised but alive. Noah had been trapped, pinned in his car seat, his small body unharmed, but his eyes wide with terror as he watched his father's life slip away beside him. She'd pulled him from the wreckage herself, screaming his name, but the boy who emerged wasn't the same. His voice had stayed behind in that twisted metal, locked away with the father he'd adored. Since then, Hannah had been drowning. 2 jobs, the morning shift at the diner, the evening shift at the convenience store, kept the bills at bay, but barely. Her hands were always busy, her mind always racing with worries about tomorrow, about Noah, about the silence that had become their third housemate. She'd moved them here to Pineville to escape the city's chaos, hoping the quiet would heal what the crash had broken. But the quiet was a lie. It pressed in on her, heavy and suffocating, a constant reminder of what she'd lost and what she couldn't fix. She reached for another towel, her breath fogging in the crisp air, when a sound cut through the wind, a rustle, sharp and urgent, from the forest's edge. It wasn't the wind, wasn't a falling branch. It was alive, desperate. Her head snapped up, her heart lurching into her throat. "Noah?" she said, softer this time, a question laced with dread. The yard stretched before her, empty save for the scattered leaves where his tower had been. He was gone. Panic clawed at her, a feral thing with teeth and talons. "Noah!" Her scream shattered the air as she dropped the laundry basket, the damp clothes spilling into the dirt. She sprinted toward the forest, her sneakers sinking into the soft earth, her eyes scanning frantically. His small footprints marked the ground, a trail of tiny impressions leading straight into the trees, into the wilderness she'd warned him never to enter. "Noah!" she shouted again, her voice cracking with terror, raw and ragged as it echoed back to her unanswered. The forest swallowed her as she plunged in, branches clawing at her face, roots threatening to trip her with every step. Rain began to fall, cold, stinging drops that blurred her vision and soaked through her thin sweater. She didn't care. Her lungs burned, her heart hammered against her ribs, but she pushed forward, calling his name over and over, knowing he couldn't answer. "Noah, please!" The words were a prayer, a plea to a universe that had already taken too much from her. 10 minutes stretched into 20, each second an eternity of fear. Her mind churned with images she couldn't banish. Noah fallen into a ravine, Noah lost in the coming storm, Noah hurt and unable to cry out. The trees pressed closer, their shadows deepening as the sky darkened overhead, turning the forest into a labyrinth of despair. Her voice grew hoarse, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "Please," she whispered, no longer sure if she was begging God or fate or the trees themselves. "I can't lose him too." David's death had broken her. Losing Noah would end her. Then, a flash of color, a splash of red against the muted browns and greens of the forest floor. Noah's jacket. She stumbled toward it, her legs nearly giving out as relief surged through her. Sharp, fleeting, a gasp of air before the next wave of dread. He was there, kneeling in the mud, his small body bent forward in a posture of fierce concentration. His hands were covered in dark earth, his fingers bleeding as he dug with a ferocity she'd never seen in him before. She slowed, her breath catching, and called out, "Noah, what?" The words died in her throat as she drew closer. He wasn't alone. Before him, partially buried in the mud, lay something large, something alive. A German shepherd, its fur caked with filth. Its body so still, she thought for a moment it was dead. Then she saw the shallow rise and fall of its side. It was breathing. Noah's hands moved frantically, clawing at the earth, his face streaked with dirt and tears, his expression twisted with a desperation that pierced her heart. He looked up at her, his gray eyes wide and pleading, though no sound escaped his lips. His message was clear, louder than any scream. "Help me save her." Hannah sank to her knees beside him, the mud soaking through her jeans, her mind struggling to process the scene. Up close, she saw the dog's swollen belly, pregnant, heavy with life. And something else. The glint of metal, a chain wrapped around its neck, anchoring it to the ground. Horror washed over her, cold and suffocating. "Who would do this?" she whispered, her voice breaking as she reached out to touch the dog's matted fur. Its eyes fluttered open, amber and warm, clouded with pain, but somehow still gentle, still trusting. Thunder rumbled overhead, the storm closing in, but Hannah knew they couldn't leave. Not now. Not when Noah's silent cry had called her to this moment, a moment that would change everything. The rain came down in sheets now, a relentless curtain of icy water that stung Hannah's skin and plastered her dark hair to her face. It hammered the forest floor, turning the soft earth into a treacherous slurry of mud that sucked at her sneakers with every step. She knelt beside Noah, her knees sinking deep into the cold, slick mess, her hands plunging into it without hesitation. The German shepherd lay before them, half buried, a pitiful mound of matted fur and shallow breaths. Up close, Hannah could see the full horror of its condition. The swollen belly, heavy with unborn life, heaving with faint contractions, the rusty wire biting cruelly into its hind legs, the chain, thick and unforgiving, padlocked around its neck and tethered to a metal stake driven deep into the ground. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the scene in stark, flickering white, and thunder roared like a beast unleashed, shaking the trees around them. But Hannah barely noticed. Her world had narrowed to this, to the dog, to Noah, to the desperate need to save something when she'd failed to save so much already. Noah's small hands moved with a ferocity she'd never seen in him, clawing at the mud, his fingers bleeding where the earth had torn his skin. His gray eyes, those eyes that carried David's ghost, were wide with a mixture of terror and resolve, fixed on the dog as if his will alone could pull it from death's grip. He didn't speak, didn't cry out, but his silence was a scream, a plea that echoed in Hannah's bones. She reached out, her own hands trembling, and began to dig alongside him, her nails breaking against the stubborn soil, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The mud slid back almost as fast as they could scoop it away, a cruel, living thing fighting to reclaim its prisoner. "Come on," she muttered through gritted teeth, more to herself than to Noah or the dog. "Just a little more." The dog's amber eyes fluttered open, meeting hers for a fleeting moment. They were warm, impossibly gentle despite the pain clouding them, and Hannah felt a jolt, like a connection, a spark of trust that pierced through the storm's chaos. "Who would do this to you?" she whispered, her voice breaking as her fingers brushed against the cold, hard edge of the chain. The metal was slick with rain and mud, its links biting into the dog's neck, leaving raw red welts beneath the fur. She tugged at it, testing its hold, and found it anchored tight to the stake, a deliberate act of cruelty, calculated and heartless. Bile rose in her throat, but she swallowed it down, focusing on the task. They had to get her out. They had to. "She's in labor," Hannah gasped, her eyes darting to the dog's belly as it rippled with a contraction, weak but unmistakable. The realization hit her like a punch. Those pups were coming, here, now, in this mud-soaked hell, and the mother was too weak to survive it alone. Panic surged, threatening to drown her, but she shoved it aside, tearing off her jacket and using it as a makeshift shovel to scoop larger clumps of mud away. The fabric soaked through instantly, heavy and useless, but it was something, anything, to fight the earth's grip. Noah mirrored her, his small hands mimicking her frantic energy, his face streaked with dirt and tears he didn't seem to notice. Lightning flashed again, thunder cracking so close it rattled her teeth, and the rain pounded harder, turning their efforts into a Sisyphean struggle. "We need to free her legs," Hannah said, her voice barely audible over the storm's roar. She clawed at the wire around the dog's hind legs, its rusted edges sharp enough to slice into her own skin. Blood mingled with the mud, a dark smear she ignored as she worked to loosen the cruel bindings. The wire had cut deep, embedding itself into the flesh, and every movement sent a fresh whimper from the dog. A sound so soft, so broken, it tore at Hannah's heart. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the rain. "I'm so sorry." Noah's hands joined hers, impossibly gentle despite their urgency, stroking the dog's head as if to promise her they wouldn't give up. His touch seemed to steady her, her whimpers fading into shallow, labored breaths. Minutes stretched into an eternity, the storm a relentless foe battering them from above. Hannah's fingers found the end of the wire, twisted tight into a knot that refused to yield. She cursed under her breath, fumbling in her pocket for her keychain, a cheap thing with a tiny multi-tool she'd never thought she'd use. The wire cutters were small, meant for thin electrical strands, not this thick, rusted horror, but they were all she had. Her hands shook, numb with cold as she positioned the tool and squeezed with all her strength. The wire bent, groaned, but didn't break. "Come on," she hissed, repositioning and trying again. This time it gave, a faint snap, and the first loop fell away. She attacked the second, thicker strand, her bloody hands slipping on the tool until Noah caught it before it could drop into the mud. His reflexes were quick, startlingly so, and he handed it back with a look that said, "We can do this." Together they freed the dog's legs, the wire falling away to reveal deep, infected wounds that made Hannah's stomach turn. Now the chain, Her tiny tool couldn't cut the padlock, so she gripped it with both hands, pulling with all her might. Noah joined her, his small frame straining beside her, their feet slipping in the mud. The stake didn't budge, rooted like an ancient tree. Frustration clawed at her, a scream building in her throat, until Noah tugged her sleeve, pointing to the chain and then the dog's head, making a slipping motion with his hands. "Over her head?" Hannah asked, understanding dawning. The dog was thin, emaciated from neglect. The chain, though tight, might just slide free. "Carefully," she murmured, working the metal up over the dog's ears. It caught, scraping skin and drawing a soft whimper, but she persisted, her touch as gentle as the storm allowed. "I'm sorry, girl. Just a little more." With a final tug, the chain cleared the dog's head, falling into the mud with a dull thud. Freedom. But the victory was hollow. The dog couldn't move, her legs too weak, her body trembling with exhaustion and the onset of labor. "We need to carry her," Hannah said, her voice firm despite the ache in her arms. She stripped off her flannel shirt, leaving only a thin t-shirt against the driving rain, and fashioned it into a sling. "This is going to hurt," she warned the dog, though she wasn't sure it understood. Together, she and Noah slid the fabric beneath the German shepherd's body, her whimpers piercing the air but her trust unwavering. She didn't struggle, didn't snap, as if she knew they were her only chance. "On 3, Hannah told Noah, meeting his determined gaze. 1, 2, 3. They lifted, and the weight nearly buckled her knees. The dog was large, at least 80 pounds, her pregnant belly adding a crushing load. Hannah's back screamed, her arms trembling, but Noah's resolve, his small hands gripping the sling, his face pale but fierce, gave her strength she didn't know she had. They staggered through the forest, the rain a blinding veil, the mud pulling at their every step. Twice Hannah slipped, her feet sliding out from under her, but she caught herself, refusing to let go. The dog lay still in their arms, her amber eyes half closed, her breaths quick and shallow. The trees parted, and there, through the storm's haze, the faint outline of their house. "Almost there," Hannah gasped, her voice lost to the wind. Noah's knuckles were white, his small body straining, but he didn't falter. They crossed the yard, stumbled up the back porch, and Hannah kicked the door open, leaving a trail of mud and water she couldn't bring herself to care about. Inside, they collapsed, lowering the dog onto the bathroom floor, her sides heaving. Mud streaked the tiles, blood dripped from their hands, but she was alive, and so were they. Hannah grabbed her phone, dialing Dr. Martinez with shaking fingers. "Please," she choked out. "She's dying." His gruff voice crackled through the line, steady as stone. "I'm coming." 30 minutes, he'd said. 30 minutes they had to keep her breathing, keep her fighting. Noah knelt beside her, his hand resting on her head, and Hannah saw it then, a bond forming, fragile but unbreakable, between her silent son and this broken creature. The storm raged outside, but in here, they'd wage their own war. A war for life, for hope, for something to hold on to in a world that had taken too much. The bathroom was a battlefield, its tiled floor slick with mud and water, the air thick with the metallic tang of blood and the damp musk of wet fur. Rain lashed the small window above the sink, a relentless tattoo that drowned out the world beyond, leaving only the flickering light of a single bulb to cast jagged shadows across the room. Hannah knelt beside the German shepherd. Luna, her tag had revealed, her hands hovering over the dog's trembling body, still raw from their frantic rescue. The storm outside roared like a living thing, but in here, it was Luna's soft whimpers that pierced the silence, each one a dagger to Hannah's heart. She was alive, yes, but barely. Her sides heaved with shallow breaths, her amber eyes half closed in exhaustion, her swollen belly rippling with the faint, desperate movements of the life within her. Noah sat cross-legged at Luna's head, his small hands resting gently on her matted fur, his gray eyes, David's eyes, fixed on her with an intensity that stole Hannah's breath. He was still silent, his lips pressed into a thin line, but there was a fire in him now, a quiet ferocity that had sparked the moment he'd found her in the mud. His fingers, crusted with dried blood and dirt, traced soothing patterns along her neck, and Hannah marveled at the way Luna seemed to lean into his touch, as if drawing strength from this boy who'd lost so much of his own. She'd called Dr. Elias Martinez 30 minutes ago, her voice breaking over the phone, and his gruff promise, "I'm coming," was all that tethered her to hope. But 30 minutes felt like a lifetime when every second could be Luna's last. The door banged open, a gust of wind and rain sweeping in with it, and there he was, Dr. Martinez, his salt and pepper hair plastered to his weathered face, his coat dripping as he swore under his breath. "Damn storm," he growled, dropping his medical bag with a thud and kneeling beside Luna without preamble. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, peeling back the muddy fur to reveal the extent of her wounds, the deep gashes from the wire, the raw welts from the chain, the hollows of her ribs pressing starkly against her skin. "She's malnourished," he muttered, his voice rough but steady. "Dehydrated, infected. How the hell is she still breathing?" "She's a fighter," Hannah whispered, her throat tight with unshed tears. She glanced at Noah, whose solemn nod echoed her words. Martinez grunted, pulling a stethoscope from his bag and pressing it to Luna's chest. His brow furrowed as he listened, then shifted to her belly, his expression darkening. "Pups are coming," he said, meeting Hannah's gaze. "But she's too weak. This could kill her, and them." Hannah's stomach dropped, a cold weight settling there. "Can you save her?" she asked, her voice barely audible over Luna's next whimper, a sound so fragile it seemed to crack the air. Martinez didn't answer right away, his hands already moving, pulling out syringes and a small oxygen mask from his bag. "I'll try," he said finally, his tone grim but resolute. "Keep her calm. She trusts you, both of you." Noah's hand never left Luna's head, his touch a lifeline as Martinez administered fluids and antibiotics, the needles slipping into her thin frame with barely a flinch. Hannah hovered nearby, her own hands itching to help but unsure how. She watched as Luna's breathing steadied slightly, the shallow gasps deepening into something less frantic, and a flicker of hope ignited in her chest, small, fragile, but there. "Good girl," she murmured, brushing a trembling finger along Luna's ear. The dog's tail gave a weak thump against the porcelain tub where they'd laid her, a tiny gesture that brought fresh tears to Hannah's eyes. Then it began. Luna stiffened, a low whine escaping her throat as her belly contracted, stronger this time. Martinez positioned himself at her side, his voice low and steady. "Here we go. First one's coming." Hannah held her breath, her heart pounding as Luna pushed, her entire body tensing with effort. Minutes ticked by. Agonizing, endless minutes, until a tiny, wet bundle slipped free, its minuscule form glistening in the dim light. Martinez wiped the membrane from its face, massaging its chest with gentle precision, and a faint squeak broke the silence. "A girl," he announced, handing the puppy to Hannah. She cradled it against her chest, marveling at its warmth, its blind nuzzling against her hand, a miracle born from despair. 4 more followed over the next hour, each birth a struggle, each pup a testament to Luna's fading strength. Martinez had to assist more than he'd hoped, his hands guiding the tiny bodies into the world as Luna's energy waned. The 5th emerged still, its chest unmoving, and Martinez shook his head, his face etched with defeat. "I'm sorry," he began. But before the words could settle, Noah moved. He leaned down, his small face inches from the lifeless pup, and whispered something, soft, rusty, barely audible over the storm's distant rumble. "Live," he said, his voice raw from 8 months of silence, a plea torn from the depths of his soul. Hannah froze, her breath catching in her chest. That voice, her son's voice, cut through her like a blade, sharp and beautiful and impossible. For a moment, nothing happened. The room suspended in a heartbeat of silence. Then, a gasp, a tiny squeak, and the puppy stirred, its little chest expanding with a desperate breath. Noah's face broke into a smile, radiant and unguarded, the first true smile Hannah had seen since David's death. Tears flooded her eyes, spilling over as she reached for him, her hand trembling against his shoulder. "Noah," she choked out, unable to say more, unable to contain the flood of love and relief and wonder that overwhelmed her. He'd spoken, 2 precious words, a crack in the wall of his silence, and it was Luna who'd drawn them out. Martinez stared, his hands stilling in their work. "My God," he breathed, shaking his head in disbelief. "I've never seen anything like that." He handed the revived pup to Hannah, who nestled it among its siblings, her tears falling freely now. Luna licked them weakly, her tongue rough against their damp fur, and Hannah saw something new in her amber eyes. A spark of fight, a mother's fierce will to protect what was hers. Hours crawled by, exhaustion settling over them like a heavy blanket. The storm lessened, its roar softening to a distant growl, and a 6th puppy arrived, smaller, frailer, but alive. Hannah thought that was the end, her body sagging with relief, until Noah tugged at her sleeve, his expression insistent. He pointed to Luna's belly, holding up 7 fingers, his gray eyes burning with a certainty she couldn't dismiss. "6, sweetie," she said gently, exhaustion dulling her voice. "There are 6. He shook his head vehemently, repeating the gesture. 7 fingers, then a pointing hand, his frustration palpable. Martinez frowned, skepticism etching his weathered face. "That's not possible," he muttered, but Noah's resolve didn't waver. "Fine," the vet relented, digging into his bag for a portable ultrasound. "Let's humor him." The machine hummed to life, its screen flickering as Martinez spread gel over Luna's belly. Hannah watched, her breath held, as he moved the wand across the dog's abdomen. For several minutes there was nothing, just the expected post-birth images, the womb empty save for the aftermath of 6 deliveries. Then, a shadow, a pulsing form, nearly hidden behind Luna's bladder. "My God," Martinez breathed, his skepticism evaporating. "There's another. It's alive, but it's not right. It's in a separate chamber, almost like a pouch. I've never seen this." Hannah's mind reeled. "How did he know?" she whispered, glancing at Noah, who simply nodded as if he'd expected this all along. "Can she deliver it?" she asked, fear creeping back into her voice. Martinez hesitated, his brow furrowing. "Maybe. She's so weak. I don't know." Noah moved then, kneeling beside Luna, his small hand resting on her belly where the hidden pup lay. He closed his eyes, his face serene, and for a long moment, nothing happened. Then Luna whined, not in pain, but in something like communication, and shifted, her body tensing with a new contraction. "She's pushing," Martinez said, watching the ultrasound intently. "It's moving." Over the next 30 minutes, they waited, breathless, as the 7th puppy inched its way into the world. Luna strained, her strength faltering, but Noah's touch seemed to guide her, a silent promise passing between them. Finally, with one last push, it emerged. Smaller than the others, its fur damp and dark, marked with a distinctive white star on its chest. "A boy," Martinez said, clearing its airways with quick, gentle hands. It lay still for a terrifying moment, then gasped, squeaking faintly as life took hold. Hannah stared at the tiny creature, then at her son, whose face glowed with quiet triumph. "Another miracle," Martinez murmured, placing the pup beside its mother. Luna nuzzled it, her tongue gentle against its star-shaped mark, and Hannah felt something shift inside her, a thawing of the ice that had gripped her heart since David's death. Noah had spoken, had smiled, had found something to fight for in this broken dog and her fragile brood. And Luna had given him back to her. The bathroom fell quiet, the storm a distant memory, and Hannah sat there, surrounded by mud and miracles, her son's hand in hers. She didn't know what lay ahead, only that this night had changed them, binding them to Luna in ways she couldn't yet fathom. But as Luna's amber eyes met hers, warm and steady, Hannah felt a flicker of hope, a promise that they weren't alone anymore. The morning sun crept over Pineville with a tentative glow, its pale gold rays slicing through the remnants of last night's storm to paint the world in fragile light. The air outside was crisp, heavy with the scent of wet earth and pine. But inside Hannah Marshall's small rental house, the atmosphere hummed with a different kind of tension, a quiet, sacred stillness born from the miracles of the night before. The bathroom, its tiles still streaked with mud and blood, cradled Luna and her 7 tiny pups, their soft squeaks and rustles a delicate counterpoint to the silence that had once defined this home. Hannah sat cross-legged on the cold floor, her back pressed against the chipped porcelain tub, her body aching from hours of strain, but her heart buoyed by something she hadn't felt in months: hope. Noah slept beside her, curled on a threadbare blanket he'd dragged from the couch, his small hand resting gently on Luna's flank. His dark hair fell over his forehead, shadowing the gray eyes, David's eyes, that had glowed with fierce determination through the storm. He'd spoken last night, his voice raw and rusty after 8 months of silence, whispering, "Live," to a stillborn pup and coaxing it back from the brink. That single word had cracked open the wall of grief between them, letting light seep into the darkness that had swallowed them since the crash. Hannah watched him now, his chest rising and falling in the rhythm of exhausted sleep, and felt tears prick her eyes, not of sorrow, but of a love so fierce it hurt. He was her son, her anchor, and Luna had given him back to her. The German shepherd lay stretched out beside him, her amber eyes half open, watching her brood with a weary tenderness that mirrored Hannah's own. The pups nursed hungrily, their tiny bodies pressed against her warmth, and the 7th, the star-marked boy, lay closest to her head, its white patch catching the morning light like a faint beacon. Luna's tail thumped weakly against the tiles as Hannah brushed a finger along her ear, a gesture of trust that warmed her despite the chill seeping through the thin walls. She hadn't slept, couldn't, not with the weight of what they'd witnessed pressing against her mind. The revival of the 5th pup, the impossible discovery of the 7th, Noah's voice breaking through the silence. It was too much, too beautiful, too fragile to let go of yet. She'd called in sick to the diner earlier, her voice hoarse over the phone as she'd lied about a fever. The manager had grumbled, but she didn't care. She needed this day, to sit here, to guard this new beginning, to hold on to the fragile thread of hope Luna had woven through their lives. The storm's roar had faded to a distant memory, leaving only the soft drip of water from the eaves and the occasional chirp of a bird brave enough to face the morning. It was peaceful, almost serene, until the phone rang. The shrill sound cut through the stillness like a blade, jolting Hannah upright, her heart lurching into her throat. She fumbled for the old cordless receiver on the bathroom counter, her stiff fingers nearly knocking it to the floor. "Hello?" she said, her voice rough from exhaustion, kept low to avoid waking Noah. "Sergeant James Keller, State Police K-9 Unit," came the reply, deep and clipped, a voice that carried the weight of authority with an edge of cold steel. "I'm calling about the dog, Raya. She's ours. I'll be there tomorrow to retrieve her." Hannah's stomach twisted, the warmth of the morning draining away in an instant. "Raya?" she echoed, her eyes darting to Luna's tag. Luna, it read, etched in simple silver, no hint of police ownership. "I found her in the woods. She was hurt, half buried. Someone left her to die. She's not fit to go anywhere." "She's state property," Keller said, his tone flat and unyielding, cutting through her protest like a guillotine. "A training mishap. I've got the paperwork. 8 a.m. tomorrow. Be ready." The line clicked dead before she could respond, leaving her clutching the receiver, her pulse hammering in her ears, her breath shallow and uneven. A training mishap? The words rang hollow, a lie so thin it frayed at the edges. She set the phone down with trembling hands, her gaze settling on Luna, whose ears twitched as if she'd sensed the shift in the air. The dog's wounds, the wire that had sliced into her legs, the chain that had choked her neck, the starvation that had hollowed her frame, weren't accidents. They were deliberate, cruel, the work of someone who'd wanted her erased. "They're not taking you," Hannah whispered, a fierce resolve hardening in her chest, her voice barely audible over the soft snuffling of the pups. "Not after everything you've fought for." She didn't have long to wrestle with the dread coiling inside her. 20 minutes later, a sharp knock rattled the front door, breaking the fragile peace. Hannah stood, brushing mud from her jeans, her legs stiff from hours on the floor. She padded to the living room, peering through the peephole with a knot of unease tightening in her gut. Officer Maria Reyes stood on the porch, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, her brown eyes sharp with a concern that set Hannah on edge. She knew Maria from the diner, a regular who always ordered black coffee and left a generous tip, her quiet demeanor hiding a backbone of steel. "Maria?" Hannah said, opening the door, her voice tentative, laced with the exhaustion she couldn't shake. "Heard about the dog," Maria said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation, her boots leaving faint wet prints on the worn carpet. "Word travels fast in Pineville. You okay? You look like hell." Hannah managed a weak smile, running a hand through her tangled hair. "Rough night. She's in the bathroom. Luna, I mean. She had pups, 7 of them." Pride flickered in her chest, mingling with the fear Keller's call had ignited. Maria's eyebrows lifted, a flicker of surprise softening her stern expression. "7? Damn, can I see?" Hannah nodded, leading her back to the bathroom, where Luna raised her head slightly, her amber eyes wary but not hostile. Noah stirred, blinking awake, and sat up, his small hand still resting on Luna's side as he regarded Maria with silent curiosity. "She's a fighter," Maria said, crouching to get a better look, her voice softening with something like admiration. "But I'm not just here to gawk. I got a call from dispatch. Keller's name came up. I know him, Hannah, but not from K9. Something's off." Before Hannah could respond, the back door creaked open and Dr. Martinez stepped in, his coat damp from the lingering drizzle, his medical bag slung over his shoulder. "Thought I'd check on her," he said, his gruff voice cutting through the tension. Behind him came another figure, a woman, mid-40s, with sharp cheekbones and a calm intensity in her dark eyes. "This is Dr. Samantha Chen," Martinez introduced, nodding to her. "Veterinary ethicist from Guardians of Loyal Service. She's here to help." Chen knelt beside Luna, her hands gentle as she traced the scars along the dog's legs, her fingers pausing at a small lump behind her ear. "A chip," she said, her tone clinical but edged with curiosity. "Not standard. Military grade, maybe." "We need to scan it." Martinez pulled a handheld device from his bag, and the room filled with a faint beep as it read the chip. Chen's brow furrowed as she studied the screen. "This isn't police issue. It's proprietary, Cerberus Security Solutions. Ever heard of them?" Hannah shook her head, unease prickling her skin. "Keller called," she said, her voice low. "Said she's Raya, police property. He's coming tomorrow." Maria's eyes narrowed. "Keller's on leave. Has been for months." "He's not K9 anymore. I'd bet my badge he's tied to Cerberus now. Private sector, shady as hell." The air thickened with suspicion as the clock struck 8:55 a.m. A black SUV rolled up outside, its engine a low growl, and a man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform crisp, his badge flashing too fast to read. Sergeant James Keller. He strode to the door, knocking with a force that echoed through the house. Hannah opened it, her heart in her throat, Noah and Luna behind her, a silent wall of defiance. "Raya's state property," Keller declared, thrusting vague papers at her, his cold blue eyes flickering over Luna, who growled low, a sound of recognition and fear. "Training mishap. Hand her over." Noah stepped forward, pointing at Keller, his silence an accusation louder than words. "You hurt her." Hannah's hands clenched into fists. "She's not fit to move," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Her wounds, her pups. She needs time." Martinez backed her, his tone sharp. "She's under medical care. You want her? You wait a week." Maria crossed her arms, citing protocol, her presence a shield. Keller's jaw tightened, his gaze lingering on Luna with a hunger that chilled Hannah to the bone. "1 week," he snapped, turning on his heel and stalking back to his vehicle, the SUV peeling away with a screech of tires. The room exhaled, but the shadow remained. "He knows her," Hannah whispered, looking at Luna, whose growl faded into a whimper. "And she knows him." Who was this man, and what did he want with their miracle? The truth lurked closer and darker than she could have imagined. Night fell over Pineville like a heavy shroud, the golden hues of morning long swallowed by a sky thick with clouds that promised more rain. Inside Hannah Marshall's small rental house, the air buzzed with a restless energy, the quiet of the day replaced by the low hum of voices and the faint rustle of papers strewn across the kitchen table. The bathroom, still a sanctuary of mud and miracles, cradled Luna and her 7 pups, their soft whimpers a fragile thread of life amid the gathering storm of suspicion. Hannah sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee gone cold, her eyes burning with exhaustion and a fierce resolve that refused to let her rest. Noah slept on the couch nearby, his small body curled under a blanket, his dark hair spilling over his forehead, a silent guardian exhausted by the day's weight. Sergeant Keller's visit had left a chill in her bones, his cold eyes and vague threats lingering like a specter she couldn't shake. Luna's growl, raw with recognition and fear, echoed in her mind, a warning that this was no simple misunderstanding. The papers he'd thrust at her sat untouched on the counter, their official stamps and typed lines blurring into meaningless shapes. She didn't trust them, didn't trust him. Maria Reyes had stayed after Keller's departure, her police radio crackling softly as she paced the living room, her sharp eyes scanning the windows as if expecting him to return. Dr. Martinez and Dr. Samantha Chen lingered too, their voices a steady murmur as they pored over the scan of Luna's chip, its cryptic data a puzzle they were determined to solve. Hannah's mind churned, replaying the day's events, the phone call, the confrontation, the way Luna's body had tensed at Keller's presence. She'd seen the wounds on that dog, felt the weight of the chain they'd pulled from her neck. A training mishap? No, that was a lie. A flimsy cover for something darker, something deliberate. She set the mug down, her hands trembling not from fatigue but from a growing anger, a mother's fury at the thought of anyone coming for Luna, for Noah, for the fragile new family they'd forged in the mud and rain. "I'm digging," she said abruptly, her voice cutting through the room's murmur. Maria paused mid-step. Martinez looked up from his notes, and Chen's sharp gaze met hers. "Keller's lying. I need to know why, who he is, what he wants with her." She stood, crossing to the ancient laptop on the counter, its screen flickering to life as she opened a browser. Her fingers hesitated over the keys, then typed, "James Keller, Cerberus Security Solutions." The search bar filled with results, and she clicked the first link, a sparse company profile, all sleek logos and vague mission statements about advanced security solutions. Nothing concrete, nothing damning, but enough to fuel her unease. Chen joined her, peering over her shoulder. "Cerberus is military grade," she said, her tone clipped with the weight of knowledge. "Private contractors, black budget stuff. They've been linked to experimental programs, but it's all whispers, no proof." She tapped the screen, pulling up an archived article from a fringe watchdog site. The headline screamed, "Project Moonlight, the Dogs of War." Hannah's breath caught as she skimmed it. Words like enhanced sensory canines, Neural implants and genetic modification leapt out, each one a shard of ice in her gut. "Moonlight?" she whispered, glancing toward the bathroom where Luna lay. "They did this to her?" Chen nodded, her expression grim. "It fits. That chip, it's not just a tracker. It's advanced, proprietary. Cerberus was trying to build something. Dogs with unnatural abilities, sight beyond sight, hearing that could pierce walls, maybe more. Luna, Raya, if that's her code name, was their success. Too successful, maybe." "Then why bury her?" Hannah asked, her voice cracking with disbelief. "She was pregnant, starving, chained like trash. If she was valuable, her pregnancy," Martinez interjected, his gruff voice heavy with realization, "it must have disrupted their control. Enhanced dogs don't breed on their own. Too risky, too unpredictable. She became a liability, a loose end they couldn't afford." Hannah's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. "So they tried to kill her," she said, the words tasting bitter, sharp with rage. "And her pups." She thought of the star-marked boy, the 7th pup Noah had somehow known was there, and a shiver ran through her. What about them? Could they inherit it? Chen's eyes darkened. Possibly. If moonlight altered her genes, the pups might carry traces, amplified even. That's why Keller's desperate. He's not just after her. He's after them. The room fell silent, the weight of the revelation settling like a stone. Hannah's gaze drifted to Noah, still asleep, his small chest rising and falling beneath the blanket. He'd whispered to her last night, his voice soft and certain. "Luna told me about the 7th. She hadn't questioned it then, too overwhelmed by his breakthrough, but now it gnawed at her. Telepathic? A bond beyond words? If Luna was Moonlight's creation, what had she passed to her son in that muddy forest? Her phone buzzed, shattering the quiet. Maria answered it, her face tightening as she listened. "Thanks," she said curtly, hanging up and turning to Hannah. "That was a contact at the station. Keller's on leave, has been for months. No canine record of Raya, no missing asset report. He's not police anymore, he's Cerberus through and through, and he's dangerous." Hannah's heart thudded, fear coiling tight around her chest. "He's coming tomorrow," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He'll take her. Take them." "Not if we can help it," Martinez growled, his weathered hands balling into fists. "She's under my care. He wants her. He'll have to go through me." "And me," Maria added, her tone steel-edged. "I'll dig into Cerberus, off the books. If they're covering this up, there's a trail." Chen pulled the ultrasound from Martinez's bag, her movements brisk. "Let's see what we're dealing with," she said, kneeling beside Luna in the bathroom. Noah stirred, blinking awake, and sat up, his gray eyes locking onto the scene with that quiet intensity Hannah had come to rely on. The machine hummed, its screen flickering as Chen spread gel over Luna's belly, now slack after birth. The image resolved, empty chambers, the expected aftermath, but then a faint shimmer, a projection from the star pup curled at Luna's side. Hannah gasped. It wasn't sound or shadow, but a vision, a glowing path winding through darkness, a promise of safety amid chaos. "What the hell?" Martinez muttered, his skepticism crumbling. Noah pointed to the pup, then to his own head, his lips moving silently. "He shows me." "She's linked to him," Chen said, her voice awestruck. "Telepathic resonance, maybe. Moonlight's goal taken further than they planned. The pup's amplifying her abilities." "They're coming," Hannah said suddenly, the realization hitting her like a blow. The vision wasn't random. It was a warning, a map, a lifeline. Keller wouldn't wait for paperwork or protocol. He'd come with force, with shadows to reclaim what Cerberus had lost. "We have to run," Maria nodded, already on her feet. "My brother's got a cabin, off-grid, 60 miles north. We can move her tonight." Martinez hesitated, glancing at Luna. "She's weak. moving her wrists the pups. "We stay. We lose them all," Hannah snapped, her voice trembling with a mother's ferocity. "I won't let him take her. I won't let him take Noah's voice again." She looked at her son, his small hand resting on Luna's head, and saw the trust in his eyes, trust in her, in Luna, in this bond they'd forged. "We go. Now." The room erupted into quiet, purposeful motion, Martinez packing his bag, Maria grabbing her keys, Chen securing the ultrasound. Hannah knelt beside Noah, brushing his hair back. "We're keeping her safe," she whispered, her voice thick with tears she wouldn't let fall. "You and me, okay?" He nodded, his silence a vow, and together they turned to Luna, whose amber eyes met theirs with a steady, unspoken promise. "I'm with you." Outside, the night deepened, the clouds parting briefly to reveal a sliver of moon, a faint, cold light that cast long shadows across the yard. Somewhere in that darkness, Keller waited, his hunger a growing threat. But Hannah felt it now, the strength in her bones, the fire in her heart, the unbreakable thread tying her to Noah and Luna. They'd uncovered the moonlight, and it was theirs to protect. The night pressed in around Pineville like a living thing, thick and heavy, the sliver of moon swallowed by a sky churning with restless clouds. Inside Hannah Marshall's cramped rental house, the air crackled with urgency, the decision to flee a weight that settled into every hurried movement. The kitchen table lay scattered with papers and coffee mugs, abandoned in the rush, while the bathroom, still a sanctuary of mud and miracles, held Luna and her 7 pups, their fragile warmth a stark contrast to the cold dread gripping Hannah's heart. Noah stood beside her, his small frame taut with determination, his gray eyes, David's eyes, fixed on Luna as they prepared to move. His silence had returned, but it was different now, purposeful, a quiet strength that steadied her even as her hands trembled. Dr. Martinez had rigged a makeshift stretcher from a blanket and 2 broom handles, his weathered hands deft despite the grumble in his throat. "She's too weak for this," he muttered, securing Luna's frail body, her pups nestled against her in a sling of towels. Her amber eyes flickered with exhaustion, but they held a spark of trust as she looked at Hannah, a trust that pierced through the chaos, anchoring her resolve. Maria Reyes stood by the back door, her police radio clipped to her belt, her dark eyes scanning the night beyond the window. "My brother's cabin, 60 miles north, off-grid," she said, her voice clipped with the precision of a plan forged in haste. "We'll take my patrol car. It's faster, less conspicuous." Hannah nodded, her throat tight with fear and gratitude. Keller's shadow loomed too close, his cold voice, his hunger for Luna and her pups, the lies he'd spun about a training mishap. She couldn't shake the image of his SUV peeling away that morning, the threat in his parting words. 1 week. He wouldn't wait that long, not now that they'd uncovered Project Moonlight, not with the Star Pup's strange abilities hinting at secret Cerberus couldn't let slip free. "Let's go," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest, and she scooped Noah's small hand into hers, his fingers warm against her icy skin. They moved as a unit, Martinez and Chen lifting the stretcher, Maria leading the way, Hannah and Noah trailing close. The back door creaked open, letting in a gust of damp air that smelled of pine and rain-soaked earth. The patrol car waited in the alley, its black and white frame a hulking shadow under the flickering streetlight. They loaded Luna into the back seat, her pups nestled tight, and Hannah slid in beside her, Noah on her lap, his arms wrapping around her neck. Martinez and Chen took the front with Maria, the engine rumbling to life as the doors slammed shut. The car rolled out of Pineville, its headlights cutting through the dark, the town's sleepy streets giving way to the winding roads that snaked into the forest. Hannah's heart thudded against her ribs, her eyes darting to the side mirror, searching for the glint of headlights that would betray pursuit. For 10 minutes there was nothing, just the hum of tires on asphalt, the soft whimpers of the pups, Noah's steady breathing against her shoulder. Then, a flash, a pair of lights in the distance, growing closer, too fast to be chance. "Black SUV," Maria said, her voice tight as she glanced in the rearview mirror. "It's him." Hannah's stomach lurched, fear clawing up her throat. "Keller," she whispered, her hand tightening on Noah's. "He found us." "Hold on," Maria snapped, flooring the gas. The patrol car surged forward, tires screeching as it took a sharp curve, the forest blurring into a wall of shadows on either side. The SUV kept pace, its engine a low growl that echoed through the trees, closing the gap with relentless precision. Hannah pressed herself against the seat, shielding Noah and Luna, her mind racing. They couldn't outrun him. Not like this, not with Luna so fragile, not with the pups at risk. "Plan B," Maria said, her jaw set as she yanked the wheel, veering off the road onto a narrow dirt track that plunged into the woods. Branches scraped the car's sides, the suspension jolting over roots and rocks, but the SUV followed, its headlights a predatory glare in the dark. "The station," she added, her voice steady despite the chaos. "It's closer. 5 miles. We can regroup there." The car rattled to a stop outside Pineville's small police station, its brick facade a dim outline in the night. Maria leapt out, barking orders into her radio as Martinez and Chen hauled the stretcher free. Hannah stumbled after them, Noah clutching her hand, his small body trembling but his eyes fierce with purpose. The station's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as they piled inside, locking the door behind them, the sound of the SUV's engine fading into the distance. For now. Maria didn't waste time. "My brother's cabin is still the best shot," she said, grabbing a set of keys from a desk drawer. "Patrol car's too hot now. He'll expect it. We'll take my personal truck, unmarked, back roads only." She looked at Hannah, her gaze softening for a fleeting moment. "We'll keep her safe, I promise." They moved again, faster now, the truck a battered blue relic that smelled of oil and pine air freshener. Luna lay in the bed, cushioned by blankets, her pups secure in their sling, while Hannah and Noah squeezed into the cab with Maria. Martinez and Chen followed in a separate vehicle, a decoy to split Keller's attention. The truck rumbled onto a forgotten logging trail, its headlights dimmed to avoid detection, the forest closing around them like a protective cloak. Miles ticked by, the silence broken only by the crunch of gravel and the faint rustle of leaves. Hannah held Noah close, his head resting against her chest, his small hand brushing Luna's fur through the open rear window. "We're okay," she whispered, more to herself than to him, though his nod against her shoulder felt like a lifeline. The cabin loomed ahead, an unassuming shack of weathered wood, its windows dark, its isolation a shield against the world. They settled inside, the air thick with dust and the scent of old timber. Martinez checked Luna, his gruff voice softening as he adjusted her IV. "She's holding," he said, a rare note of relief in his tone. Hannah knelt beside her, her hand stroking the dog's head, and froze as Luna's amber eyes flared, a sudden, unnatural blue, glowing like twin lanterns in the dim light. "What the—" Martinez started, but Hannah shushed him, her breath catching as the glow illuminated the room, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Noah pointed to the star pup, nestled at Luna's side, its white mark pulsing faintly in sync with her eyes. "Star puppy shows things," he whispered, his voice raw but clear, breaking the silence he'd slipped back into. Hannah's heart stuttered. Another crack in his wall, another gift from Luna. She followed his gaze, and there it was, a shimmering vision, faint but vivid, a path winding through the forest, a safe route etched in light against the dark. "Bioluminescence," Chen breathed, crouching beside them, her eyes wide with awe. "Moonlight's work, enhanced sensory markers. She's guiding us." "She's protecting us," Hannah corrected, her voice thick with tears she wouldn't let fall. Luna's glow faded, her energy spent, but the message lingered, a promise of safety, a defiance of the shadows hunting them. The cabin's walls closed around them, a fragile sanctuary, but Hannah felt the strength in her bones now, fueled by Noah's courage and Luna's will. Then, a hum, Faint but growing, the distant rumble of an engine cutting through the night. Keller. He'd found them again. Hannah's pulse raced, her hand tightening on Noah's, but Luna's amber eyes met hers, steady and fierce. They weren't done running, not yet. The forest waited, and with it, their next fight for freedom. The forest night pulsed with a primal energy, its shadows thick and restless as the distant hum of Keller's engine grew into a predatory growl. Inside the cabin, Maria's brother's off-grid sanctuary, the air was taut with fear, the fragile peace shattered by the sound of pursuit closing in. Hannah Marshall stood by the window, her breath fogging the cracked glass, her heart hammering against her ribs as she clutched Noah's small hand in hers. The truck's escape had bought them time, but not enough. Keller was relentless, a shadow tied to Cerberus's greed, hunting Luna and her pups with a hunger that chilled her to the bone. The cabin's wooden walls, weathered and thin, felt like paper against the threat bearing down on them. Luna lay on the stretcher in the center of the room, her 7 pups nestled against her, their tiny bodies trembling with the instinctual fear of the hunted. Her amber eyes, still faintly glowing from that eerie blue flare moments ago, met Hannah's with a steady resolve that belied her frailty. The star pup, its white mark pulsing faintly, pressed closer to her head, a beacon of something extraordinary, something moonlight had forged, and Cerberus now craved. Noah knelt beside her, his gray eyes, David's eyes, wide with a mixture of awe and determination, his small hand resting on her fur as if anchoring her to them. He'd whispered again, "Star puppy shows things." And the vision of a safe path lingered in Hannah's mind, a lifeline she couldn't ignore. Maria paced near the door, her police radio silent now, her dark eyes scanning the room for options. "He's close. Too close," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "The truck's hidden, but if he's got thermal or trackers, we're sitting ducks." Dr. Martinez adjusted Luna's IV, his gruff hands steady despite the tension etching his weathered face, while Dr. Chen stood nearby, her sharp gaze flickering between the dog and the window. "We can't stay," Chen said, her tone clipped but calm. "Her abilities, whatever Moonlight did, they're our edge. We use them." Hannah nodded, her throat dry with fear and resolve. "The forest," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "That path. It's our only shot." She looked at Noah, his small face pale but fierce, and squeezed his hand. "We run again, okay? Together." He nodded, his silence a vow, and she felt a surge of pride. Her son, broken by loss, but unbroken by this night, was her strength now. They moved fast, a quiet flurry of motion in the dim light of a single lantern. Martinez and Chen lifted the stretcher, Luna's weight a fragile burden between them, while Maria grabbed a flashlight and her sidearm, her jaw set with determination. Hannah scooped Noah into her arms, his small body warm against her chest, and followed as they slipped out the back door into the night. The forest loomed, its trees a wall of shadows swaying in the wind, the air thick with the scent of damp moss and pine. The engine's hum was louder now, headlights flashing through the undergrowth a quarter-mile away. Keller's SUV relentless in closing. "Head west," Maria whispered, leading them into the trees, her flashlight beam cutting a narrow path through the dark. The ground was uneven, roots snagging at their feet, branches clawing at their faces, but they pressed on, the stretcher jostling with every step. Hannah's arms ached, Noah's weight a steady pressure, but she didn't falter, couldn't falter. Not when Luna's soft whimpers urged them forward, not when Noah's trust burned in her veins. The forest swallowed them, muffling the engine's growl, but it wasn't enough. Headlights swept closer, the crunch of tires on gravel echoing through the trees. "There," Noah said suddenly, his voice a soft, rusty thread breaking his silence. He pointed ahead, his small finger trembling but sure, and Hannah followed his gaze. A rocky outcrop loomed, half hidden by vines, a cave, its mouth a jagged shadow in the earth. "Luna showed me," he added, his eyes locking onto hers, and she saw it then. The flicker of that glowing path from the vision, faint but real, leading them to shelter. "Inside!" Maria barked, her flashlight sweeping the entrance as they stumbled toward it. The cave swallowed them whole, its damp walls cool and slick, the air heavy with the scent of stone and moss. They set Luna down near the back, her stretcher resting on a flat slab of rock, her pups huddling closer as the cold seeped in. Hannah lowered Noah beside her, her knees buckling as she sank to the ground, her breath ragged with exertion and fear. The engine's growl was deafening now, headlights piercing the cave's mouth as the SUV screeched to a stop outside. "They're here," Martinez hissed, his hands balling into fists. But before anyone could move, Luna's eyes flared, bright blue, blinding in the dark, a glow that bathed the cave in an otherworldly light. Hannah gasped, shielding her eyes. And then she saw it, shapes shimmering in the air, faint at first, then solidifying into a pack of glowing dogs, their forms ethereal but fierce, their snarls echoing off the stone walls. Illusions, conjured from Luna's mind, projected with a force that defied reason. Outside, shouts erupted. Keller's men, their voices sharp with confusion and fear. "What the hell is that?" one yelled, his flashlight beam jerking wildly as the phantom pack lunged toward them, teeth bared in silent menace. Boots scrambled on gravel, curses rang out, and the headlights swung away as the SUV reversed, tires spinning in panicked retreat. The illusions held for a moment longer, then faded, Luna's glow dimming as her head sank back, her energy spent. "She scared them off," Chen whispered, her voice trembling with awe. "Moonlight gave her that. Illusions. A defense mechanism." "She saved us," Hannah corrected, her hand stroking Luna's fur, tears welling in her eyes. She looked at Noah, who nodded, his small face alight with wonder. "Star Puppy helped," he said, pointing to the 7th pup, its white mark pulsing faintly in the dark. Hannah's breath caught. Another vision shimmered, this one from the pup. A winding tunnel deep within the cave, a hidden path to daylight, to safety. "Deeper," she said, her voice firm despite the exhaustion pulling at her. "There's a way out." Martinez and Chen lifted the stretcher again, Maria leading with her flashlight, and they pressed into the cave's belly, the tunnel narrowing around them. The walls glistened with moisture, the air growing colder, but the star pup's vision guided them, left, then right, then up, until a faint glow appeared ahead, the promise of dawn beyond the stone. They emerged onto a rocky ledge, the forest stretching below, the highway a thin ribbon in the distance. The sound of Keller's engine was gone, lost to the night, but Hannah knew he wasn't finished. Not yet. She knelt beside Luna, her hand resting on Noah's shoulder, and felt the weight of their bond, a thread of light forged in darkness, unbreakable despite the shadows hunting them. Headlights flashed below, Martinez's truck, Chen at the wheel, a beacon of rescue guided by Luna's silent call. "They heard her," Noah said, his voice soft but clear, a gift she'd never tire of hearing. Hannah pulled him close, her tears falling freely now, and whispered, "We're not done fighting, are we?" Luna's amber eyes met hers, steady and fierce, and the answer was clear. No. The cave had sheltered them, its illusions a shield, but the road ahead loomed uncertain. They'd escaped, for now, but the moonlight in Luna's blood and the star in her pup promised more battles to come. The dawn broke over the forest with a quiet grace, its pale light filtering through the trees to paint the world in soft hues of gold and gray. Hannah Marshall stood on the rocky ledge outside the cave, her breath fogging in the crisp morning air, her arms wrapped around Noah as the rumble of Dr. Martinez's truck grew closer. The highway stretched below, a thin lifeline cutting through the wilderness, and the sight of the vehicle, Chen at the wheel, guided by Luna's silent call, brought a flood of relief that weakened her knees. They'd made it through the night, through Keller's pursuit, through the cave's illusions and the star pup's glowing path. But the weight of their escape clung to her, a shadow she couldn't shake, even as the promise of safety drew near. Noah pressed against her, his small body warm despite the chill, his gray eyes, David's eyes, fixed on the truck as it climbed the winding trail to meet them. His hand rested in hers, steady and sure, and she marveled at the strength in him. This boy who'd lost his voice to trauma but found it again in Luna's fight for life. The stretcher lay beside them, Luna stretched out on its blanket, her 7 pups nestled close, their tiny forms a fragile miracle against her battered fur. Her amber eyes met Hannah's, weary but fierce, and a soft thump of her tail against the fabric spoke of a trust that anchored them all. Martinez leapt from the truck as it rolled to a stop, his weathered face etched with exhaustion and relief. "You're a damn sight for sore eyes," he growled, his gruff voice softening as he knelt beside Luna, checking her IV with gentle hands. Chen joined him, her sharp features softened by a rare smile, and together they lifted the stretcher into the truck's bed, securing it with care. "Guardian Sanctuary's an hour out," she said, her tone brisk but warm. "It's fenced, secure, a haven for dogs like her. We'll make it." Hannah climbed into the cab with Noah on her lap, Maria sliding in beside them, her police radio crackling faintly as she kept watch. The truck lurched forward, its engine a steady hum beneath the rustle of leaves, and the forest fell away, replaced by rolling hills and the distant shimmer of a lake. Hannah held Noah close, his head resting against her chest, his small fingers brushing Luna's fur through the open rear window. "We're safe now," she whispered, more to herself than to him, though his nod against her shoulder felt like a promise, a fragile one, but real. The journey passed in a haze of quiet, the tension of the night unraveling thread by thread. Hannah's mind drifted to the cave, Luna's glowing eyes, the pack of phantom dogs that had driven Keller's men back, the star pup's vision guiding them to freedom. Moonlight's legacy, Chen had called it, a gift turned weapon turned shield. She glanced at Luna, whose breathing had steadied, her pups nursing with soft, hungry squeaks, and felt a swell of gratitude so deep it hurt. This dog, this broken, extraordinary creature, had given her son his voice, had given her a reason to fight when she'd thought she had nothing left. Guardian Sanctuary emerged at the edge of a valley, its high fences glinting in the morning sun, its sprawling grounds dotted with kennels and patches of green. A handful of staff met them at the gate, veterinarians and volunteers, their faces kind but guarded, as if they knew the weight of what they sheltered here. They carried Luna inside, her stretcher borne like a royal litter, and settled her in a quiet room with clean blankets and soft light. The pups tumbled over each other, exploring their new space, and Hannah watched as the star pup, the 7th, nuzzled closer to its mother, its white mark glowing faintly in the dimness. Chen knelt beside Luna, her hands tracing the scars along her flank with a tenderness that belied her clinical air. "Moonlight was about control," she said, her voice low, almost reverent. "Psychic reconnaissance. Dogs linked to handlers, minds bent to orders." Luna defied that. Her pregnancy broke their hold, and her pups, they're something new. That star one especially. His projections, her illusions, they're beyond what Cerberus planned. Hannah sank to the floor beside them, Noah curling up next to her, his small hand resting on Luna's head. "She protected us," she said, her voice thick with tears she wouldn't let fall. "And Noah, he's talking again. Because of her." She looked at her son, his face alight with a quiet joy she hadn't seen since David's death, and felt the ice in her chest thaw a little more. "We'll protect you," Noah whispered, his voice raw but clear, a vow that echoed in her heart. "Right, Mom?" "Right," Hannah said, pulling him close, her own promise fierce and unwavering. "We're a family now, us and her." Luna's amber eyes met hers, warm and steady, and the bond between them tightened. A thread of light forged in darkness, unbreakable despite the shadows that had hunted them. Martinez stood by the door, his arms crossed, his gruff exterior softened by the scene. "She's stable," he said, a rare note of optimism in his tone. "Give her a few days, she'll thrive here." Maria nodded, her sharp gaze softening as she watched the pups. "I'll keep digging into Cerberus," she promised. "Keller won't stop, but neither will we." The room settled into a gentle quiet, the sanctuary's walls a shield against the world outside. Hannah sat there, surrounded by the soft sounds of life. Pups nursing, Noah's steady breathing, Luna's faint tail thumps, and let herself breathe. They'd found refuge, a moment to rest, but she knew it wasn't the end. Keller was out there, his hunger a lingering threat, and Luna's powers, her pup's potential, were a secret too big to stay hidden. Still, in this fragile sanctuary, she felt a flicker of peace, a chance to hold on to what they'd fought for. The star pup stirred, its white mark glowing faintly, and Hannah smiled through her tears. They'd escaped the night, but the dawn brought new promises and new battles. For now, though, they were together, and that was enough. The afternoon sun hung low over Guardian Sanctuary, its golden light spilling through the high windows of Luna's room, casting long shadows across the clean blankets and soft floors. Hannah Marshall sat beside the stretcher, her knees drawn up to her chest, her hands resting lightly on Noah's dark hair as he dozed against her side. The sanctuary hummed with a gentle rhythm, the distant bark of other dogs, the soft murmur of staff voices, the faint rustle of leaves beyond the fence. But beneath it all, a current of unease pulsed in her veins, a whisper she couldn't silence. Luna lay before her, her amber eyes half-closed in rest, her 7 pups sprawled in a tangle of tiny limbs, their breathing a soft chorus of life. The star pup, its white mark glowing faintly even in sleep, nestled closest to her head, a beacon of the extraordinary, a reminder of the danger they'd barely escaped. Hannah's gaze lingered on them, her heart swelling with a fierce, protective love that had grown roots in the mud and chaos of that stormy night. Noah's small hand rested on Luna's flank, his face peaceful in sleep, and she marveled at the change in him, the way his silence had softened, his voice breaking through in whispers of trust and wonder. Luna had done that, had given him back to her, and in return, they'd fought for her, defied the shadows that sought to reclaim her. The sanctuary's walls felt solid, its fences high and unyielding, but Hannah knew better than to trust in safety. Not yet. Not with Keller out there, a ghost in the darkness, his hunger for Luna and her pups a threat that hadn't faded. She thought of his cold blue eyes, the way they'd flickered over Luna with a possessive gleam, the lies he'd spun about a training mishap. He wasn't finished. Cerberus wasn't finished, Doctor. Chen's words echoed in her mind. Moonlight was about control. Her pups are something new. The star pup's projections, Luna's illusions, they were power, unpredictable and unbound, a secret too valuable to let slip free. Keller had retreated in the cave, driven back by fear, but men like him didn't give up. He'd come again, with more men, more shadows, and the thought sent a shiver down her spine. Maria had promised to dig, to unearth Cerberus's trail off the books, and Martinez had vowed to stand guard, but Hannah felt the fragility of their refuge. How many dogs like Luna were out there, suffering in silence, their minds bent to cruel masters? How many pups like these had been buried, their potential snuffed out before it could bloom? She couldn't save them all, but she could save this one, this family they'd forged in the crucible of that forest night. Her fingers brushed Noah's hair, then Luna's fur, and she whispered, "We'll fight for you." It was a vow to them both, a quiet defiance against the unseen threat lurking beyond the valley. Keller's fate was a question mark. Had he abandoned the hunt, licking his wounds, or was he regrouping, plotting his next move with Cerberus's might behind him? The uncertainty gnawed at her, a shadow she couldn't outrun. She pulled a notebook from her bag, its pages worn and creased, and began to write. Their story, a testament to love and resilience, a shield against the dark. The words flowed, raw and unpolished, a lifeline to hold on to as the sun dipped lower, casting the room in twilight. Luna's eyes opened, meeting hers with a steady warmth, and Hannah felt it, their bond, a light that no shadow could extinguish. But outside, the world waited, and with it, the unseen threat. They'd found sanctuary, but the fight wasn't over, not yet. Twilight settled over Guardian Sanctuary like a soft blanket, the last rays of the sun bleeding into a sky streaked with violet and gold. Inside Luna's room, the air was warm and still, the faint hum of the sanctuary's life fading into a gentle hush as night crept in. Hannah Marshall sat on the floor beside the stretcher, her legs folded beneath her, her notebook resting on her lap, its pages filled with the raw, messy truth of their journey. Noah lay curled beside Luna, his small body nestled against her warmth, his dark hair spilling over his forehead as he murmured softly in sleep. Words she couldn't catch, but their sound alone was a melody that soothed her soul. His gray eyes, David's eyes, were closed now, but she knew the spark they held, reignited by the German shepherd who'd fought her way into their lives. Luna rested peacefully, her amber eyes half open, watching Hannah with a quiet intensity that felt like understanding, like love. Her 7 pups slept in a tangled heap around her, their tiny chests rising and falling in unison, a fragile chorus of life born from chaos. The star pup, its white mark glowing faintly in the dim light, lay closest to her head, its small form a testament to the extraordinary power moonlight had woven into her blood. Hannah reached out, her fingers brushing Luna's fur, and felt a shiver of gratitude, a deep, aching appreciation for this creature who'd given her son his voice, who'd given her a reason to keep fighting when grief had nearly drowned her. The notebook in her lap held their story. Every muddy step, every whispered vow, every heartbeat of fear and hope. She'd written it for Noah, for Luna, for herself, a shield against the shadows that still lurked beyond the sanctuary's fences. Keller was out there, a ghost in the dark, his hunger for Luna and her pups a threat that hadn't faded. But here, in this moment, they were safe, and that safety was a gift she clung to with both hands. Maria's promise to dig into Cerberus, Martinez's gruff vow to stand guard, Chen's quiet determination to protect Luna's kind, they were a circle of strength around her, a fragile but fierce wall against the unseen. Noah stirred, his small hand tightening on Luna's fur, and he mumbled, "We're okay," his voice sleepy but clear, a gift she'd never tire of hearing. Hannah smiled, tears prickling her eyes, and leaned down to kiss his forehead. "Yeah, sweetie," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We're okay." Luna's tail thumped weakly, a soft echo of agreement, and Hannah felt the bond between them tighten, a thread of light forged in the crucible of that stormy night, unbreakable despite the trials they'd faced. The star pup shifted, its white mark pulsing faintly, and Hannah wondered what lay ahead, what secrets it carried, what battles they'd yet face. Cerberus wouldn't stop, not with Luna's powers and her pup's potential dangling like a prize just out of reach. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. They'd escaped the forest, defied the shadows, and found sanctuary together. Whatever came next, they'd face it as a family. Her, Noah, Luna, and these fragile miracles born of moonlight. She closed the notebook, setting it aside, and pulled Noah closer, his warmth a steady anchor. Luna's eyes met hers, deep and warm, a silent promise that stretched beyond words, beyond the walls of this refuge. The night deepened outside, the stars hidden by clouds, but in here they shone, bright, fierce, eternal. Their story wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for now they had this, a bond beyond fear, beyond loss, beyond the reach of any shadow.